Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Art of Procurement Friday show. So I wanted to use today's episode really to follow up on the discussion that we had last time out, which was episode 26. If you recall, the guest was Stan Litow, and Stan is the president of the IBM Foundation and vice president of corporate affairs at IBM. And if you remember, Stan was joined by Tim Coates, the head of IBM Supplier Connection Program. So today on the Friday show, I wanted to explore CSR, corporate social responsibility, just a little further, and the role that procurement can play, over and above what we discussed in the episode with Stan and with Tim, which I think was mainly focused on how procurement can help spur small business growth by giving small local businesses the opportunity to win contracts from larger business. And I think that that's just one part of CSR, which is why I thought it important to do a follow-on episode today. Before I do go into the question, I do want to remind you that I recently published a report, and it was called The 21 Tips to Help You Secure Your Dream Procurement Job. The report is a summary of all the different tips that cover the entire job search process, and it was compiled from recent Art of Procurement interviews. I know that I've been talking about this report for a little while, but frankly, I do so because it continues to be very popular. So if you haven't already got your copy, you can download it from artofprocurement.com/21tips. Okay, so let's go into the meat of today's episode and talk a little bit more about corporate social responsibility. I don't really intend to do a deep dive, but just an overview of why it's important to procurement and how we should go about providing value back to our organizations by facilitating CSR-related initiatives. So for those of you who didn't yet have the opportunity to listen to that last episode I referred to, I'll let Stan Litow, the president of IBM Foundation, give an overview of what CSR is from his perspective.
Well, I see corporate responsibility as at the intersection between business strategy and societal involvement or engagement, and that the behavior of a company has a lot to do with its success as a business, but also its broader success in the community, which I see as being directly connected to its business success. So obviously what used to be called, just philanthropy has been broadened in a range of community collaborations and partnerships to make a difference in education or economic development or social services or healthcare or the environment. But also companies have a big role to play in terms of their supply chain practices, especially large global companies, their activities in the environment, their labor practices, the broadest possible impact that a company can have, on society. And, that can be expressed in a variety of different ways.
So while it's indisputable that large organizations have social responsibilities, how important really is that to a CPO? Let's go back to Stan. And Stan's perspective is that from a supply chain perspective, CSR is all about facilitating growth.
Well, I think it's true that community, government, public sector as a whole, looks at large companies as an opportunity to create economic growth. And one way that companies can do that is by developing new products and services, growing your company, growing your workforce. But another way is using your supply chain to be able to influence the growth of smaller businesses or minority businesses or women-owned businesses. So if a company takes a look at its procurement policy as, number one, it's an opportunity to get real value in terms of the products and services that you purchase through your supply chain, but it's also an opportunity with a real focus to affect, local businesses, small businesses, women or minority-owned businesses. So many companies looked at, the ability to, look at their supply chain as an opportunity to affect growth of small businesses as an opportunity. And this is a good example of something that's basically connected to your business strategy, because very often small businesses, in addition to their job growth opportunity, also have an innovative flavor to them that can add a focus that would be important to a large company. So I think that that's where these things come together. And when you enter into difficult economic circumstances and people look for companies to really invest in communities, one way they do it is through their own hiring, and another way they do it is through their supply chain, which can really add to the growth of other businesses.
And one of the things that really interested me in the conversation with Stan was that when talking about small business, the fact is that it's also a way for a company to act innovation, as innovation often comes from startups and from small businesses. So I also posed that same question, why should procurement care about CSR, to Jeff Talbot. Jeff is the Vice President of Member Services at the Sourcing Industry Group, or SIG. And really, if any organization has its finger on the pulse of what's important to a CPO, then it's most definitely SIG. First, though, for context, I asked Jeff to name the top 3 priorities of CPOs that he sees.
We do have some recurring themes. Obviously, one of the highlights at this summit was our focus on risk, risk mitigation and management. Another one that it keeps coming around and evolving is social responsibility, and of course, talent.
So CSR is one of the top 3 priorities for a CPO this year. So I asked Jeff for a CPO's perspective on the same question that I posed to Stan. So what does CSR mean to a CPO?
What we look at is corporate social responsibility, or CSR, right? Incorporate the company's sense of responsibility towards the community and the environment in which it operates. So we're finding members that are expressing this through their waste and pollution reduction processes, by contributing educational and social programs, and through volunteering. And it's not a new concept, but we see as recurring themes. Our members continue to make it a priority in an ever-expanding global economy with evolving issues, right, such as sustainability, diversity, human trafficking, and conflict minerals.
And then I asked, why should this be important to a CPO? And here's Jeff again.
It's a great differentiator from a standpoint of sourcing and procurement, looking to differentiate and add value within the organization. Right? We've done a pretty extensive study. We participate with IBM in their CPO study, and have found that that an active role in corporate social responsibility is really part of redefining procurement's role as a value proposition in a new, an evolving area of business.
Right.
It's really a vehicle which procurement can leverage to move from the traditional back office role to being perceived as a modern strategic asset for the business, right? If sourcing is involved and they're looking at their first, second, third, fourth tier, right, and they identify a risk associated with somebody who is involved in human trafficking, and they can identify that before the media, and they can curb it and they can get away from it. Think of all the soft dollars, right, or the hard dollars that's going to save with regards to spending that off, right, and getting to it before it blows up.
So both Stan and Jeff agree that an imperative exists in promoting and facilitating corporate social responsibility. What I was also interested to hear from Jeff's perspective of procurement is that playing a lead role in facilitating CSR is a key way in which procurement can elevate its role in an organization and start demonstrating value, or the provision of value, over and above our traditional measure of cost savings. But the thing that really stood out to me is the different perspective once you get under the surface. So specifically that to a CSR advocate and a non-procurement executive like Stan, the ROI is over and above helping in the brand positioning, is really about facilitating growth, both for your own company through access to innovation, but also growing the community within which you operate. And this can be at a geographic level or an industry level, for example, really bringing a philosophy that a rising tide lifts all boats. On the flip side, the CPO view is that CSR plays a critical role in the management of risk. So it's interesting to me that our view in procurement is that we want to save the company from harm, whereas the outside procurement view is how to help a company grow. I do want to state that this is what Jeff is hearing from CPOs. I didn't ask if this reflected his own personal view. But, right there, that feels to me to be kind of a microcosm of the difficulty we have as procurement professionals in elevating the role of procurement, that we should be more cognizant about how we help our companies grow, not just focused on the saving our companies from harm, which I think is what most of what we do is. That is another topic for another show, though. With all this in mind, I think it's clear that procurement has a key role to play in CSR in 2016. And even if it's something that's not a priority at a corporate level, there's things that you can do as a professional to integrate CSR activities into your day-to-day work. And that's particularly the case if you have responsibility for sourcing or for developing category or commodity strategies. So, for example, if you're in a position where you can influence CSR activities undertaken by the companies in your supply base or across your supply chain, then you can help educate them on what they can be doing. You can even mandate certain activities if they're things that are important to your organization. And of course, nothing comes for free, there's a price. So that's assuming that your company is willing to pay for the cost of your suppliers undertaking those activities if they don't already do them. My view from my learning on the subject to date, and I have to admit that before I started the Art of Procurement back last year, CSR was something that was more conceptual to me. It's not something that I had actually proactively worked on within a procurement role. But what I'm seeing as I talk to more experts in the field is there's really three key pillars of CSR from a procurement perspective. I think that CSR initiatives can play a role in our age-old pursuit of cost savings. Examples are things like travel and energy demand management, recycling, packaging optimization is an interesting one, and those both reduce cost and they positively impact the environment. The second pillar is the facilitation of growth, and that's something as advocated by Stan Litow at IBM. Look at how you can integrate small businesses and diverse businesses into your supply chain, and look further than established players to identify innovative startups or small businesses that might help your company go to market with something that's more compelling than your competitors. Be a real competitive advantage by leveraging the innovation from your supply base, and as I say, look at smaller companies to be able to pull that innovation from. The third is risk management. I think that it's important to build more robust risk monitoring or management practices into both your sourcing process and supplier governance and management programs. That's not just related to CSR, but there are things that risk management practices and good risk management practices will enable you to manage and mitigate against from a risk perspective when you're thinking of CSR. So think about what kind of risks may be prevalent based on what you're buying, the country that you're buying from, what are their cultural norms, and also what's the robustness of the CSR risk management programs that your suppliers themselves have in place. As I mentioned, this is a subject that I've really only started researching over the past 6 months or so. So I'd really love to hear the perspective of you if you have any other points of view on procurement's role in CSR. And actually, if you or if you know of anybody else who I should be talking to on the Art of Procurement regarding CSR, please let me know. You can do that just by connecting with me on Twitter, which is twitter.com/peidson, or go to the website artofprocurement.com/recommend, and there's a form there just to fill in to recommend a guest. That's artofprocurement.com/recommend. Okay, well, thanks for listening to the show. As a reminder, if you'd like to listen to the interview with Stan Litow of IBM, that's episode 26. And the discussion with Jeff Talbot of SIG, that's all the way back in episode 3. I will link both of those interviews up in the show notes for today, and that will be at artofprocurement.com/27. So those links will be at artofprocurement.com/27. Well, that's it for another Art of Procurement show. I'll be back with another great interview show on Tuesday. Until then, take care, and I hope you have a great weekend.